At its core, Toastmasters is about to bring people together to grow in professional development. As the world changes, and you actually bring people together presents new opportunities and, yes, new challenges. Currently, some of us are meeting online, while others are able to meet in person. How do you include both audiences, online and in person, in a way to maintain your club's professional environment and also feels right for its culture? Today, Jamie Walker is going to share advice and experience in doing just that. Having worked in advertising and web development over 2 decades, Jamie has spent a lot of time considering an audience online experience. His agency has been meeting online since early 2020, and that summer, he gave a presentation to the agency on running a successful online meeting. In his home club, the Palmetto Toastmasters, Jamie has helped set up and maintain the club's hybrid meeting experience since mid-2021. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. If you have a question at any time, please send it via the chat feature, and we will get to as many possible during the Q&A. Now presenting tips on facilitating a hybrid meeting. Please welcome Jamie Walker.
What if we combined a car with an airplane and a submarine? We could vacation anywhere. Or how about putting a tomato together with an onion? We would save so much time chopping vegetables. When you bring together great items and activities into a hybrid result, solutions multiply. I'm going to share tips and experience today on one such possibility, a hybrid Toastmaster meeting for your club. It's the perfect time for a solution like this. We need benefits like this now and going into the future. These types of meetings offer remarkable flexibility when you need to be one place, but you'd like to be somewhere else in person with your fellow Toastmaster club members. You can travel, make last-minute plans, and still attend meetings. Your club can invite guests from anywhere in the world who can now join online easily. Some technologies even let us record like we are today, so your club can review its performance and practice to improve. I'm going to touch on 3 actions today that I want us to keep in mind when practicing this type of meeting. I want to quickly discuss some of the roles created by a meeting like this. Then I'm going to walk you through how my club, the Palmetto Toastmasters, evolved its hybrid meeting setup over several months, incrementally. As Avery mentioned, I am going to leave some time near the end for a Q&A session, so feel free to add questions to the chat, or we will take live questions at that time, and at the end there will be that survey mentioned. But before we get started, I want to learn more about your club and what you're doing today by asking you to answer one poll question. Has your club ever held a hybrid or online meeting? And as you submit answers, we should see results coming in. All right, we have some members running some hybrid meetings. That's great. There might be some tips about what we're doing that you might take to your club. And lots of people have also held an online meeting. That seems like a very useful thing in the recent year or two. And if you're running an online meeting now, you are already familiar with some of the tools that you would use in a hybrid meeting. This is great. I think everyone here might learn something new. Back to the presentation. Let's learn right now about the 3 activities that I mentioned before that I'd like us to keep in mind. The first is to define exactly what is a successful hybrid meeting. It's important for us to agree on this definition right now. For this presentation, this is a meeting that simultaneously includes in-person and online participants where the roles, activities, and professional atmosphere are as similar in experience to your normal Toastmaster meetings as possible with minimal trade-offs. That means people can hear the speaker and the audience. They can see who they need to see. They have access to the timer wherever they are, so they can see those colors and know where they're at in their speech. They can vote on speakers. And maybe most importantly, the meeting runs as intentionally as it always has. But this is still a broad definition because your club is unique. Therefore, do what works for your club. I'm about to show you my club's current setup, how we evolved that. But your needs may be different. Focus on the needs of your members and guests. Honor your club's culture. Consider the ability, the interest, the availability of your members to contribute to creating a hybrid experience. Work with the devices individuals are willing to lend and bring to the meetings. And what works currently might not always work. That's why I want to encourage you to change when you can and should. We all know Toastmasters is all about growth. That's why I would advise you when considering a combined meeting like this, start small and grow the experience incrementally. Ask the general evaluator, say, hey, general evaluator, can you include some notes about the hybrid aspect of this meeting in your evaluation? Review recordings of the meeting and practice, make improvements with your hybrid team. Speaking of that hybrid team, let's talk about roles. The first role holds an awesome amount of responsibility. This role is the Zoom master. This role is responsible for the teleconference service that you're going to use to facilitate the online portion of your meetings. If there's a paid account, they will manage the paid account. They are responsible for scheduling and starting the Zoom meetings. They allow people to enter the meeting. They control Zoom settings outside and during the meeting, like muting people if necessary. They record the meeting if that's a capability that your club has. And they should be able to help members answer questions about meeting online and in person. And they can't do this alone. So the next role, it's a little bit of a vague name, but I'm calling it the hybrid setup team. Your club might be using lots of devices. The Zoom master might need backup for when they cannot be available. So other people need to be familiar with this and be available to help set up the meeting and get everything tested. I would encourage all of these roles to arrive extra early to the meeting to do that setup. My club meets at 6:30 p.m. People start showing up at 6:15. So the hybrid setup team and the Zoom master arrive at least 30 minutes early so we can set things up, test it, make sure everything is going to be perfect for the meeting. And now onto that setup. What I'm going to show you next is the evolution of the Palmetto Toastmasters hybrid meetings. Remember, this is what worked for us. It might not work for you, but hopefully seeing what we do and some of the settings that we use gives you some ideas. Our club is lucky enough to have a fantastic in-person space. I hope your club is too. Your meeting space might look something like this. You've got seats for members and guests, a lectern for speaking roles. You've got some kind of timer device. We use light bulbs. I'll talk about that later. You might already have a laptop as part of your meeting so that you can use visual aids in speeches. You might be lucky enough to already have a television in your meeting space that you can connect to that TV to make those visual aids as big as they need to be. If you have those items, that's great because you're already on your way to setting up an in-person and online meeting. No matter what, the first edition you're going to need is some kind of teleconference service. We're using Zoom in this meeting today. There are other options. Some cost money, some are free. There's also Google Chat, there's Microsoft Teams. My club uses Zoom because it is feature rich, and that makes for better meetings. From here out, I will be referring to Zoom in terms of its features and recommendations because of that. Let's talk about some details about Zoom. You are going to need one paid plan. That is roughly $150 a year. Maybe something that your club fees could be used for. Why do you need one paid plan? Mostly because you need a paid plan to host meetings that are longer than 40 minutes. I think most Toastmaster meetings are longer than those. Ours are 1.5 hours to 2 hours long, so we have to have that paid account. It also determines how many guests you can have, though for most clubs, 100 participants is enough. That's what comes with the free account and the first paid account, but it's something to keep in mind. I also want to point out that although you need one paid plan, if guests join in online or members are bringing devices in to help with other parts of your hybrid setup, they can use a free account. The paid account only needs to be used to create and host those meetings. The Zoom Master schedules those meetings ahead of the planned time. They use their Zoom app and that paid account to schedule a meeting as seen here. They will name the meeting, set a date and time. An important feature is to set up this meeting as a recurring meeting. If you want to reuse this meeting's link and settings, meeting after meeting, you need to set it up to be a recurring meeting, and I recommend this. You may choose to use a waiting room so that as people arrive, they don't automatically enter the meeting. You might not know who they are, and you might want the Zoom Master to have control over that. If so, use a waiting room. Pay attention to your audio settings to make sure that people can join by telephone if necessary. Take note of your advanced options for features that might be useful for your meeting. I've checked off mute participants upon entry so that if someone enters in the middle of a meeting, they're automatically muted. When this process is complete, Zoom will send you details that you can send to your members and guests. Another setting that I think is important to point out is this one. By default, in Zoom, when an audience member enters or leaves a meeting, you hear a chime. It sounds like a doorbell. Sometimes it's great, but if someone enters or leaves mid-meeting, it can be very distracting. I recommend turning this off, and the Zoom Master can do that on the main account in their online settings. Another recommendation is needed when sometimes online users are having internet troubles and they have lower quality video or audio. It can get very choppy, which is not good. In a speaking role, choppy audio is especially unhelpful. In this case, I recommend that the Zoom Master or the Toastmaster of the day ask that speaker to mute their Zoom window and use their phone to call in using the phone number provided by Zoom. That way, even though their video is choppy, you should have clear and consistent audio, which is one of those trade-offs, but it gets you closer to the atmosphere that you're used to in an in-person meeting. As I mentioned, and we've talked about several times today, using Zoom, you can record a meeting, and that's great because members can go back and watch their performance to see how they did. The Zoom Master will record that meeting at the beginning by using the Zoom controls in their Zoom app as seen here. When the meeting is over, Zoom will save that recording as a file on the Zoom Master's computer. If you don't know where that's going to be saved, you can find it in your Zoom application settings under recording. If you're going to use an online service like Zoom, you're going to need an internet connection. It's also nice to use a Wi-Fi router in your meeting space so that it provides that wireless internet connection. Therefore, if you've got devices all over the place, they're all connected to the internet. Zoom does have internet recommendations, and I'm going to share a link to that in the handout that I'm going to provide at the end. Important points to consider are it does recommend a broadband internet connection. It has bandwidth requirements. So what's bandwidth? Bandwidth is how much data you can pull down from the internet and push up to the internet based on your internet and Wi-Fi connection. You're doing that right now. You're pulling data down from the internet right now at a certain amount, and that's video of me. You're also pushing data up to the internet right now. That's video of you. Those are two different measurements on your internet connection. Zoom gives minimal requirements and optimal requirements. Again, I will provide a link to this later. If you don't know how to figure out your bandwidth in your in-person meeting space, go to that space, connect to your in-person internet or Wi-Fi, and search Google for test my internet speed. Google provides a tool when you do that. And when you click run speed test, it will test your download bandwidth and your upload bandwidth. It's a great tool. Now that we've got an internet connection so that we can use our online conference service, we're going to start adding devices. This is what we started with. One laptop. This might be the first device that you add to your room. Again, you're going to want to check device requirements provided by Zoom, especially if you start having trouble. You might want to go up there and see what Zoom recommends having. And this device is going to need some features. A camera. This is very important. If this is your first and only device, that camera needs to be used so that the online participants can see the speaker, the audience when necessary, the timer, the word of the day. This device needs a microphone. This is paramount. This is going to be the main microphone in the in-person room. All other microphones will be muted. This will pick up sound from the speaker, the audience, whatever it needs to pick up. You're going to use one microphone. More than that is going to start to provide feedback and be very disruptive to your meeting. And this device needs speakers so that the people in the room can hear everybody online. When starting off like this, keep in mind the functions of a regular, successful meeting. You need to be able to present the word of the day. So maybe you take that piece of paper and you put it in front of the camera, or you have the Zoom master upload a file to the chat. People online need to see the timer if the timer's in person. People in person need to be able to see the timer if the timer is online. We all need to vote. The Zoom master might have people online submit their votes via chat. The Zoom master then aggregates them and gives them to the timer. And we still need to be able to choose table topic speakers. In this case, the Zoom master might need to communicate who is available online that the table topics master can pick from. One other note about this laptop. As I said, this is the main microphone, should be the one and only microphone that's turned on in that in-person room. By default, Zoom tries to be helpful and suppress that background noise. So if you're in a meeting like we are today and your cat is meowing back here, the online audience can't hear it. In a Toastmasters meeting, you're going to want to hear that speaker up front, but you might also need to hear the audience clapping or someone saying something from the back of the room. So we're going to need to adjust this setting. On that laptop's Zoom account, you're going to go to the application settings, to audio, and then set suppress background noise to low. Like I said, you might be lucky enough to have a television in your meeting space so you can connect it to that TV so that the TV display goes to that, the laptop display goes to that TV. You're going to connect the laptop for dual monitors. So online guests are big enough for everybody in the room to see. And hopefully that TV has speakers louder than the laptop so that the people in the back can hear what the speaker on the TV has to say. This is a great addition to that first device. This is an example of our setup at Palmetto Toastmasters. We have the laptop at the front of the room. Ours is pointed at the audience at this time because we have multiple devices, but you could use it for the speaker if necessary. It's positioned close to the lectern, so it can pick up the speaker, but it can also still pick up the audience. The TV is right behind it, so you'll notice that we have the Zoom window positioned so that speakers are not obscured by that laptop. We also usually have someone sitting close enough to that laptop that if they need to step forward and do something on the laptop, that's very easy. For more control of the meeting, it is helpful for the Zoom master to actually have their own device. I would recommend a laptop. That way they can control aspects of the meeting from, say, the back of the room where it's less distracting. You're going to want to use the paid account here. If this is your setup, The Zoom Master device is going to use a paid account, and that laptop at the front can use a separate free account. But using the paid account on the Zoom Master device means you're going to log into the paid account here. You're going to start the meeting here with that account. Like I said, you can control the meeting from the back of the room. From back here, you can manage online voting via the chat and let the timer know who's being voted for. You can manage other chat needs. And the Zoom Master can help with visual aids, screen sharing and sharing files back here. Another activity that the Zoom Master can do this way is to spotlight speakers. So what is spotlighting? As the Zoom host, when the Zoom Master spotlights a speaker in the Zoom window, that speaker becomes the biggest presence. Their window becomes the biggest, not just for the Zoom Master, but for everybody. It's a great way to focus on that speaker for everybody at once, so everyone's having a similar experience at home or wherever they are and in the room. When the speaker's done, they can click Remove Spotlight, and Zoom will act like it usually does. Again, you have to be the host or the co-host to do this kind of thing. At this point in my club, we decided to step things up a bit. We wanted to put some focus on the main speaker. So we installed a Lectern camera near the back of the room. Now this is pointed at our lectern. And now that we had a camera pointed at the lectern, we could use that laptop to point at the audience and the timer. So this is going to be a phone or other internet device with a Zoom app. And again, it can be a free account. It needs to have a camera because that's really its sole purpose, is to have a camera on the speaker. Its microphone needs to be muted. Once again, the microphone at the front of the room is the main microphone, and we don't want to create feedback. And the speakers also need to be muted, so that's not distracting. It's helpful to have this device on a tripod so you can position it with intention. We have ours above the heads of our audience members, so there's a clear image of the lectern. And I would recommend using a battery backup. If this device is going to be on for an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's going to use a lot of power, and you don't want it turning off in the middle of the meeting. So I would recommend investing in a battery backup and having this connected. This is an example of our Lectern camera positioned on its tripod nice and tall, and you can see down here that it is connected to the battery backup. Once we had a Lectern camera, we realized we could use the same solution or identical solution to put a camera on the timer so that the online participants had a clear view of the timer. In our club, for our timer colors, we use a device that someone built. It's a box with light switches and 3 light bulbs for green, yellow, and red. Whatever your club uses, you could have the timer sit in a particular place and put a camera on them. If the timer happens to be online, you might want to have someone mimicking that timer at the back of the room so that the speaker at the lectern can see that. Now this is going to be just the same as that Lectern camera because it serves a very similar purpose. It's going to be a phone or other internet device with a Zoom app on a free account, running a camera with its microphone muted and the speaker muted. You may need a tripod depending on how you want to place this. And again, for the same reasons, I recommend using that battery backup. Here's an example of our timer camera. Our Zoom Master usually has a little table in the back of the room with this stuff set up, and oftentimes the timer sits right next to that person. In this case, there was a Christmas tree there. And this is the final piece that we've added so far. We were wondering if we could get a little bit better audio quality on that speaker. Basically, could we move the microphone closer to the speaker without moving the laptop, because we needed its camera positioned right where it was. This gave us a better chance of clear speaker audio. Here's an example of ours positioned right behind that lectern, and is connected over to the laptop that is off to the side in this photo. Our example is a Blue Yeti USB microphone that one of our members already have. It runs about $100, but I need to point out that less expensive options are also very helpful. The point here is that the microphone is closer to the speaker, but it can also still pick up the audience. Now we see our whole room as it currently is set up come together. We've got all of our devices set up by our hybrid team before the meeting started, our laptop and TV at the front of the room, the camera on the laptop pointed at the audience. The microphone is there behind the lectern. You can't really see it. The Lectern Camera is set up, and the Zoom masters at the back of the room with their device and the timer camera pointed at the timer. We're all set for members and guests to show up in person and online because they can. My hope is that after all of this, you can envision your club attempting a hybrid meeting, even if they start small. If your club's already having hybrid meetings, I hope that you saw something here that you could pick up on, or maybe we validated what you're already doing in your meeting. If you're doing something and you want to share today, I'd love to hear it. Whatever you do, I encourage you to keep in mind your club's definition of what a successful hybrid club meeting is. To remember that you really need to do what works for your club, what they need to do, what they want to do, and what they can do. And be open to change. Evaluate this process, just like we do in Toastmasters, and change as you can. Other things that you can do are to check out the handout that I've got. I've got a link that I'm going to provide in the chat to a PDF that contains most of this information, including links. One of those links includes Toastmasters International hybrid meeting resources. This website has some really great materials that you could use for hybrid meetings. It's got things from technology that you consider and questions you might want to ask to figure out if your club is ready for a combined meeting like this. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask me or my club, you can visit our website and submit those questions on the contact form at palmetto.toastmastersclubs.org. I highly recommend visiting a hybrid club in person or online, because again, you can, to check out what they do, ask questions about it. I already mentioned my home club is running hybrid meetings, but I also know of a few other clubs running hybrid meetings. Floor Toastmasters here in the upstate, Low Country Toastmasters in the Charleston area, and Spartanburg Toastmasters. I'd like to hear from you today too, if your club is running hybrid meetings, any tips that you might have for us. Change can be scary, but as our keynote speaker said today, change can do something to us, or it can do something for us. In this case, hybrid meetings can do something for us, which is to make our meetings even better. After all, great meetings make great clubs. And a hybrid meeting is a powerful way to explore becoming even better. At this point, I'm going to move on to the Q&A. Avery's going to help me field some questions in the chat. And if anybody has a question that they want to ask live, just raise your hand and we'll hopefully get to you. I see someone asked, could you send your definition of a successful hybrid club meeting, Valerie? Yes, that is included in the handout in the link that I just sent. Please, anybody let me know if they're having trouble downloading that link.
You have Ann Elliott with her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. This was a great presentation, rich with information. And when your members in the meeting in person, when they want to say something, what mic picks them up?
When members in person want to speak in our setup, let me quickly.
I'm thinking like, for example, a response to a table topics question, for example.
When they're in person, their voice is picked up by that laptop in the front of the room, or actually in the latest version of our setup, the microphone that we use next to the lectern can pick up the audience, especially because we changed that Zoom setting to not suppress background sounds. And also in our meetings, the table topics speakers approach the lectern, so that camera's there for them too.
Thank you.
All right, we got another question, hand raised from Laura Meyer. Up next.
Hi, Laura.
Hi there, thank you. My question is, do you see yourself continuing, your club, continuing hybrid meetings after hopefully the pandemic goes away? Or do you anticipate going back to full-time in-person meetings?
We haven't officially had that conversation, but I anticipate that we're going to try to continue this. It really has opened things up. We've had a couple of people from out of state contact us and ask if they could attend one of our meetings. And we're excited to find out that even though some of us were meeting in person, they could still join. We also have members that have last minute changes. They need to travel for work or something similar, and they would still like to join the meeting. And I want to encourage that, because when a lot of great participants are in the meeting, it just creates the best atmosphere ever.
Thank you so much. We've had club members move away who were great club members, and we wanted to keep them in the fold, and we've been able to do that with Zoom. So I wanted to know if you felt that might still be viable. Awesome.
I do, yeah. And we've had a similar problem. I'd like to keep those people as well.
Next, we have Richard Couture.
Good morning, one and all, and a great presentation. You can add Fort Mill Toastmasters to your list of hybrid meetings. And one of the things I wanted to add, and if you're not aware of it, there's a vote feature on Zoom. So as the Zoom master, we set up the vote feature, and for table topics, and if we have several speakers to vote online. And then all the stuff is automatically put together for us. Makes it a little bit easier.
That is
and question for whoever. And have you ever used a timer background that some Toastmasters club uses, so that a remote timer can just change their backgrounds?
Yes, I'll respond to those. First, thanks for that great suggestion. I love the timer role. It was the first role I volunteered for in my club, but I quickly found out it is a little difficult to manage in the chat. It's challenging to keep track of who has already voted. So the vote feature is a great idea, and I'm gonna bring that back to my club. The second question was, has anyone used the timer backgrounds? Yes, we've used those at our club. Toastmasters provides backgrounds on the Toastmasters International website. So you get the red, yellow, and green, and they're branded. I don't know if anyone else on the call has also used that and would like to speak up.
And I just want to add one more thing that we do when it's possible. If somebody brings in a tablet, we have a place in the room, in the front of the room, to hang it. So you have a audience view from one of our cameras.
That's another great idea. That is a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I do see real quick that someone has asked for the presentation. I do have a PDF of the presentation itself, and I will add that to the chat when we get to the survey portion of the meeting, because it's going to take me a moment.
All right, next we have Leonardo Pizza. Happy late birthday to you. You missed the party.
Thank you. Yeah, Jamie, great presentation so far on the hybrid, setting up. There's a lot of challenges that we still face every day. Mostly one of them is Wi-Fi. One of the things I think we kind of following up what somebody else said before, I think this is going to stay, hybrid is going to be like the new way. Since the pandemic started, I've noticed people from other clubs in other states are coming in, and now I'm getting feedback. We were approached by a club in India, and they did a presentation. But the issue is like now they kind of want to like have more members. Like they almost want to have a hybrid club meeting, like ours and theirs together. How would you handle something? I told them I don't know if we could handle something like that. But how would you handle a situation like that when it's international?
So in this, are you asking how would I handle it because it's international, or how would I handle it because there are two in-person rooms?
The way, yeah, it's two rooms coming together. How could you handle a meeting like that? Like, how could you handle a hybrid meeting of, two clubs like that are, and international? I don't know if that really matters, but, basically two clubs coming together.
I think that each room needs its own Zoom master. Each room needs one person responsible for the setup and the control and the quality of that experience. They need to agree which of those is responsible for the entire meeting. So there will be one Zoom meeting scheduled by a paid account that's the link sent out to everyone. So they need to agree which Zoom master is responsible for that, who's sending it out. Then they might have a setup similar to this. And in our room, if you're looking at this diagram, if it's helpful,
yes,
up there in the top right corner, where we see our online participants, we would see their room as well. In our meeting today, we have this laptop pointed at our audience, and that's a Zoom account. So at times you do see a picture of us on that TV. Hopefully both rooms also have an understanding. It would be really helpful to share as much information as possible in a central location. Hopefully they're somewhat familiar with each other's setups. So for instance, if let's say the Greenville Club and the Charleston Club are meeting and I'm in the Greenville Club, the Charleston Club I know has a Lectern camera and it's called the Charleston Lectern. So when it's time for that speaker to speak, the host, whoever we agree that Zoom master is, would then spotlight the Charleston Lectern Camera, even though that Zoom Master host could be in the Greenville club. Does that sort of scenario help?
I think I know you're saying you're going to have to, you'd have to do a little bit of preparation beforehand, and then you'd have to have a Zoom master and then kind of coordinate how you're going to handle, transitioning who's speaking from which club, who's evaluating from each club. So there's a little bit of prep, but also a Zoom master would actually help tremendously.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great challenge, and one that would require evaluation and growth and an understanding of from both clubs. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes. Who is that?
Okay. This is Robert Loon. I'm showing a lot of hands, and I don't want to take Avery's place, but
Yeah, I'm gonna get to Ross and Ahead.
oh,
And
okay.
'cause it's some
Okay.
questions got to answer the hand still just raised.
We're doing the Q&A. We're doing the Q&A right now, so people are asking questions.
All right, up next we have Ross Resfalls.
Yes, I have a few questions. One deals with how do you handle awards such as best speaker, best timer, best evaluator, and so forth when you are in this environment? And do you continue to work on techniques that speakers have, that is, to be able to be at the lectern in person and move around that area so that you're not just confined to being right at the lectern itself?
Great. Yeah, great questions. As far as the winners, so we still have winners no matter where they are. If you had a prepared speech, but you are online, you are still eligible for the voting. If you're referring to how do we get that physical award to you, that's a little bit different. We would need to send that award. If it's a ribbon, a pen in some cases, if it's a certificate, we will send that to you in the appropriate way. As far as space around the lectern, that is a consideration of how we have that camera set up in the back. We are intentional that there's on the camera screen, there's a good amount of space to either side of the lectern. I would recommend to club members, if their plan is to, for instance, move around the audience during their speech, that's totally understandable. I would coordinate that with the Zoom master or someone else in the room and say, is it okay if that person sort of controls the lectern camera and follows me around the room? I think it just takes a little bit of planning.
And the other part of that is if they have power presentations to incorporate within their presentation, do you have the ability to tap into your video with regards to the parts of their speech, as you have been doing so in this environment?
Sure. They also need to plan that with the Zoom master and the hybrid team. We've done it in our club. We have presented that way from that laptop in the front to the television. And it required a little bit of setup. I didn't get into that. That is for our club and the computer that I have. I had to write down the method to do that so I could quickly do it. We were encouraged to find a remote control solution so that you don't have to be right in front of the laptop to change those screens. And it looks like we're ending in 10 seconds.